Y'all, looking at the readings this Sunday, I realize it's kind of a back to basics sort of Sunday morning. And every once in a while, that's important to make sure that we check in on the basic stuff. Just this past week, I was helping do some tech support with somebody who was having a hard time with their wireless phone charger. You know, those wireless phone chargers, couldn't get it to work. And we were digging into the settings, playing with little settings, resetting it, adjusting it, trying to figure out what would make it work. And finally, it dawned on me to ask, did you make sure that the cord's plugged into the wall? And of course, it was not. It's important to start with the basics sometimes. And one of the things that is on my mind this Easter season is a very basic, what does it mean to be a Christian? You know, what does it mean to not just be somebody who believes in God and loves God? You don't have to be a Christian to do that, right? But what does it mean to be a Christian, particularly? In this Easter season, that seems like a fitting question. Kind of basic, but sometimes it's good to go back to the basics. All three of our readings kind of touch on this. You see, people loved God and followed God, believed in God long before there was Christianity. And there was a general understanding that God was all-powerful, almighty, all-knowing, and created all of us. And that therefore, you know, in response, we were supposed to love and serve God. Our job was to serve our God. Jesus comes along and really upends this in a way that nobody expected. You know, Jesus comes and he is divine, he is God, God incarnate on earth among us. And so the reaction of his disciples is to all say, oh, then we should serve you, our God. But that's not what Jesus wants. Jesus looks at them and says, no, I am your God. I am the divine. My job is to serve you. That's not what they were expecting at all. You know, Peter doesn't want Jesus to wash his feet. He's supposed to wash Jesus' feet. Jesus is his master, right? And then Jesus says, that's not how this works. I, your God, love you so much that I am here to serve you. I am here to be willing to give my life for you. And he does. He gets down on his hands and knees and he washes Peter's feet. And he gets up on that cross. And he is willing to give up his life for us. The second part of that, though, that's really important is if Jesus is not looking for us to chiefly be about worshiping him and serving him, he really wants us to be about serving others. Jesus washes Peter's feet not so that Peter can say thanks and wash them back, but so that Peter can then go find someone else and wash their feet. And that person can go then and wash the next person's feet. Peter goes out and proclaims this to all the church that's struggling to understand. He says, this isn't what you thought this was. That's what's happening in Acts of the Apostles, is he's shaking up their understanding of what it means to follow God. Doesn't mean to take the love God gave you and then just give it right back and keep it as a closed loop. That the job is to take the love that God gave you and to then share it with the next person so they can share it with the next person. And Peter challenges them and tells them, your job is not to be willing to just say, I would give my life for my God, but I would give my life for the people around me. Just like God was willing to give his life for me. Instead of making it a closed loop, that causes it to spread infinitely. John The disciple John, who wanted so desperately to sit at Jesus' right hand. Well, Jesus doesn't need John to sit at his right hand. Jesus needs John to go out into the world and find someone who's living in need and be that person's right hand. That's who you should be the right hand of, John. And it changes John. He writes letters to the church. He forms new church communities around the world. He writes letters to them like the one that we just read today. And you know, we all know John 3:16, right? I'll bring it back up on the screen. We all know John 3:16. But you know, what about, back to it, what about 1 John 3:16? Know love by this, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for one another. What if we proclaimed 1 3:16 as loudly as we proclaim John 3:16? And then when we look at Jesus, he tries to make sense of this to his disciples who are struggling to understand, and he uses a metaphor that they would have got, the metaphor of the shepherd and the sheep. And for all of their lives, they knew what the metaphor of the shepherd and the sheep was, but they always saw it as the sheep belonged to the shepherd. The shepherd is the master who controls them, and that the sheep owe their lives to the shepherd and should obey. Jesus turns it around on them and says, you don't understand. The shepherd is there to serve the sheep. The shepherd is there to love them, to protect them, to be willing to give his life for them. That is the relationship of the shepherd to the sheep that Jesus calls them to. And it upends their whole way of understanding it. So, like I said, back to basics. If we're getting to a very basic, fundamental understanding of what does it mean to be a Christian versus just anybody else who particularly believes in God or has faith, well, the particular call to being a Christian at a very basic level is taking that love that God gave for you and giving it to others. Taking that service that God was willing to do, say, I'm all-powerful, almighty, and I'm going to serve you. And then taking that and we being willing to serve others. Taking a God that loves us so much that God would be willing to lay down his life for us. And then for us to take it and be willing to lay down our lives for those around us. At a very fundamental level of Christianity. I mean, if every Christian in the world did this, it would change everything. It would change the whole world. If we look at every instance in this world of hardship, marginalization, of people being oppressed or killed, of people being hated because of something about them or their difference, hardness of heart, genocide, indifference, all sorts of tragedies and all sorts of tragedies and hardships caused by humans could be wiped away in an instant if all of us adopted this principle of loving the people around us so much that we put them first. We made them our people, that we made ourselves willing to die for them, willing to give everything for them, because God gave everything to us. That, at a very basic level, is the equivalent of taking the Christian cord and making sure that it's plugged in the wall. So let us go out into the world and asking ourselves all the time, how can we take what God has given us, the service and love and sacrifice God has given us, and share that same service and love and sacrifice with those around us? Thanks be to God. Amen.